The next photos are all from a vacation I took earlier this year to Puerto Rico with my wife, and I just wanted to show you some of the neat critters there. So when we got there, the first day, right on our room, the building of the wall leading into our room, there was this little kind of cabin we were staying in, were these beautiful hieroglyphic moths, which also we can find here, but I've never seen here in the Southeast. But these beautiful hieroglyphic moths in the family Nollidae, and also some green banana roaches. And this one is such a beautiful cockroach, I think. We get them in the southern US a little bit every once in a while, but they're much more common in the tropics. And this is again in Puerto Rico on Vieques, a small island off the coast. Also saw some really cool other critters like web spinners on their famous large tree that they have. They have this very large old tree that's really beautiful. And trapjaw ants um, on the property, which I think most people wouldn't like, but I loved, were tarantulas everywhere. There were big holes in the property. It was this beautiful, kind of small little resort. There was only a few couples staying there. But I went out most nights to look for things, and there were lots of tarantulas around. This was the only female I saw, but these really beautiful native Puerto Rican brown tarantulas. And with tarantulas, my wife found on a trail one day one of my favorites that I'd never taken a photo of was a tarantula hawk wasp. So these fairly large, very beautiful wasps. My wife saw on a trail flying around. I was able to get some good photos of this specimen because it wasn't too flighty. But these are the nightmare of tarantulas. And you think you have nightmares of tarantulas. These tarantulas have nightmares of these. And these things go and grab the tarantula, sting it, paralyze it, and then bury it for their young to feed on. Very beautiful wasp. And then one of my favorite things from Puerto Rico was this little tiny, tiny fly. These are droplets on the leaf of a banana. And I only noticed this fly for one reason. I'll show you in a second. This was actually at a rum distillery, which was very fun as well. But this very tiny, tiny fly I noticed because I saw it move. And I hope to show you how amazing it is. This is this fly. Now it's a very shaky phone video, but what I love about this fly is that they never change their orientation when they're moving. And so this is Stenomicra. They probably are in their own family. Nobody really knows what they are, or what they're related to, or what they're where they lie in the evolution. But they only run like this. I think it's just so adorable. They run back and forth, never changing orientation. Now, fun fact, in Australia, there's a whole group of flies called the upside down flies that may be related, and they do the same exact thing except for always pointing upside down. But anyway, I really loved seeing that fly. And you know how much I love flies. All right, now to Costa Rica. So in August, I traveled to Costa Rica to teach a course on flies. To help teach a course, I was one of 8 instructors, and there were 30 students down there. And we spent 10 days in Costa Rica. And no pictures of the rum distillery. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was really cool, and we brought home some coffee rum, which was really nice. And uh, we've been drinking it. So, but Costa Rica was beautiful. It was so wild. We stayed out in the middle of the jungle and saw lots of really cool things, including lots of mantises. The several genera of mantises I took photos of, but on the first night, this one came to the lights and was eating a moth. This really beautiful leaf mantis. And then not only were the leaf mantises, but there were also dead leaf mantises. So this was probably my favorite one. I rescued this from a trap, but really amazing looking dead leaf mantis. Um, and then not just mantises, but like I alluded to, there were also stick insects, a variety of stick insects around, including this very large one with these giant horns on its head. We even had at one point a stick insect flying around the classroom. That's how wild it was. It was just super beautiful. In fact, I don't show any uh, uh, landscape shots, but just imagine the jungle and beautiful jungle and sun and whatnot. Although it was fairly cool, it was only about 70 something degrees, but 90% humidity, so very, very wet. Now here's another stick insect, but you'll notice this white thing on it, which is actually what we call a tick fly. This is a punky, a ceratobegonid midge that feeds on the blood of other insects. And these ones in the tropics, and we found a lot of them breeding everywhere. These flies fill up so much, you can see the abdomen of that female and these little tiny wings that they can't even fly away afterward. And so they feed on they suck and suck and suck the juices, just like a mosquito would suck on you. These are sucking on a stick insect, and then would drop off, crawl away, and lay its eggs somewhere. And now, speaking of flies, I have to talk about flies since it was a fly course, but there were some really beautiful flies out there. So this yellow-headed soldier fly, related to the black soldier flies you all see around your compost bins, but this is Siphamia, a really beautiful fly, about I would say about a half an inch long or so. It's not a tiny fly, but not a huge fly. And then lots of really beautiful flies too, like this crane fly. This is apparently probably an undescribed species. When I posted on iNaturalist, one of the experts was looking at descriptions and could find no description of this particular wing pattern and whatnot. So very beautiful crane fly, not very big, but really striking one. And here was another one that looks a lot like a love bug, march fly that you might find in Florida or the Gulf states. Sometimes you see them around here. But in fact, once we got closer, we learned that it was a crane fly as well. So these tropical crane flies are really beautiful. There were some other flies that I encountered that I'd never seen before, these families of flies. So these banana flies, nereids, and a palomeriid fly, which was actually much larger than a house fly. It was a fairly decent sized fly, but with these beautiful gold stripes on it, and just very small family of flies. In North America, there's only one species in Florida, and in mostly southern Florida. And then I don't know if there are any that get up to Texas, but they're very tropical basically. And so same with these nereids. Also encountered some dangerous creatures. So both of these are among the most powerful stinging insects in the world, the most painful stinging insects in the world. We've got an executioner wasp, which is a type of paper wasp. So relative to what you see around here, but actually a fairly large for one of them. Actually much larger than any paper wasp I've seen, or about as large as some of the biggest ones we have around here. And there were bullet ants everywhere. And these are the iconic, really painful stinging ants. And this was a queen that somebody found. And this queen ant was almost the size of this paper wasp, if not bigger. And so these ants are huge and have a very painful sting. And it wasn't just the insects that were dangerous or worrisome or you had to look out for, but this beautiful but deadly strawberry poison dart frog. They were all over this one trail we went on, and this species has color variations. Some species in the range or some specimens in the range are all orange or red, whereas this is called the blue jeans variety, where it has these blue leggings on. Very beautiful. I saw them calling. They were just all over the place. Definitely not something you want to touch or eat because it will kill you. And then vipers. So there are vipers around. This one a student saw right on the middle of the trail, curled up like this. It was about the size of a dinner plate. And it was very beautiful. And I love seeing them, but I did not want to step on one because we were in the middle of nowhere and it would not have been fun. So anyway, two deadly animals. But back to some more fun things. Some of the most amazing things were this contractile scarab beetle. So that's it on the left, rolled into a ball, and then they can pop out and crawl around like a regular beetle. The funny thing about these is that they are technically found here in the southeastern U.S. This genus is, but I have never encountered one of these, and over 10 days I encountered one of them there. So I was super happy to see this beautiful little scarab beetle. Uh, Beautiful bees were everywhere, especially these orchid bees. Now, this isn't the classic orchid bee. This is apparently a much larger species. It is a cuckoo orchid bee. So this thing actually is a kleptoparasite of other orchid bees. They'll lay their eggs in the other bees' nests and have them take care of their young kind of thing. But I don't know all the biology about this thing, but it is a very beautiful bee, obviously. A couple more amazing things. Somebody found a peanut-headed lanternfly. So they call it this peanut-headed bug, but this is technically a lanternfly. This is the family Fulgoridae and is the type genus Fulgora of the same family that spotted lanternflies are in. But obviously this one is much bigger. You can see it gets very large, and it's got here are the eyes, here are the antennae. The mouth parts are actually back here, and this is really just the back or the front, the forehead, in this huge kind of peanut shape. But really, what they think is it's probably a lizard mimic. You can see the dark eye and the teeth, kind of. Probably not an alligator. It's a little small for that, or I guess down there would be caiman or something. But you can see they also have these really beautiful eye spots on the hind wings. But massive insect, and related to spotted lanternflies, but not a pest. And finally, probably the most impressive thing that we saw and that got the most gasps and whatnot was this stalk-eyed fly. So this is a picture-winged fly in the family Eulidiidae, and the males of this species have these amazing stalk eyes. The basically the head is broadened, and the eyes are on the tips of those stalks, and you can see when you look from the front, that's what it looks like. And what these do is the females have a normal shaped head, and the males then butt heads to vie for females. And what they do is they don't actually fight, but what they do is they kind of get up, and because their eyes on the stalks, they can see who has the bigger stalks. And unfortunately, the one with the smaller stalks, does not get to mate with the females. There's probably a lot of complexities in the mating system, but it's just such an amazing fly. And in fact, this is not the only stalk-eyed fly that exists down there. There are stalk-eyed flies have evolved numerous times across different groups, and all across the world. So it's a very amazing and group or type of phenomenon in flies. But this one is one of the most extreme in the world, and it was just so amazing. And there was a big storm that pushed them in the building, and we've apparently there were two found that night that this big storm came by, and the rest of the trip we didn't find any. But just utterly amazing. So, any questions before I move on to BOLOs? Let me take a look at the chat and see this. Uh, so the advantage of the wide stalks. Yep. Yep. So yep, the stalks are for male competition. So very cool. I really enjoyed that trip. I didn't even show you half, not even close to half of the photos that I took there. I took 3,000 photos. I'll probably edit about probably around 800, 700, 800 photos total, but we'll see. But anyway, you're welcome. And you can go on my Flickr. I have albums for that trip and the trip in Puerto Rico if you want to take a look at some of the other cool critters that I found. But this was just a nice selection that I wanted to show you all. Okay, and finally, before so we can get to Mike's bolos, let's do some arthropod bolos for the late fall and winter. So, what to be on the lookout for? First is fall cankerworms. So this is a moth species that has a green inchworm caterpillar that hatches in the spring and begins defoliating trees in the spring, although we haven't seen any huge outbreaks lately. But it's called the fall cankerworm because the fall is when the adults become active. And you have these wingless females that crawl up trees, they call for males, they'll mate, and then they'll lay eggs, batches of eggs on the trees or even on surfaces of buildings and places like that, and to hatch next year in the spring, and little inchworms will come out of them. You can band trees to help if you have a big population of them year to year, but they seem to be very sporadic. But just be aware of them. Let's see. And then let's see. Oh, and I had a question in there. How do we get the photos indoors? Are the critters still alive? Yep. So all those ones on white backgrounds, the critters are still alive. I just put them under a container. Now that stalk-eyed fly, I tried multiple times to just have the container over it. We ended up having to chill it down a little bit in the fridge, but I typically don't do that. And when we just kind of put it on the paper, let it kind of wake up and look natural, and then snap a few shots. So yeah. Another thing people don't realize is that winter is also full of certain insects that only come out in the winter, or typically mainly come out in the fall and winter when it's cold. And so springtails, when they're on snow, they're called snow fleas because they hop around on the snow surface. Winter crane flies may come to light, and this is the time of year when they're going to start to become more abundant, and then by spring they're going to be kind of fading away. And then you get things like winter stoneflies and stuff like that. Now, if you are making fires in the home over the winter and you bring in the firewood, sometimes you have insects that have been developing in that firewood. The change of temperature inside the home will then signal that it's the right time of year to emerge. They're wrong, of course, and they're going to be mistaken, but you have tricked them into emerging and they will fly around your house. And so some people wonder, okay, why am I seeing all these beetles or these wasps or these things? make sure you kind of check the firewood, look for dust or sawdust or exit materials or shed skins or things like that coming out of the firewood. That might give you a clue that that's where it came from. And then soon to be firewood is a Christmas tree, but the Christmas trees are alive and beautiful. And people, if you're getting natural Christmas trees, bring them indoors. For a while, they're going to be good, but once they start to dry out, any critters on them might be kind of crawling away. And the most common are the Christmas tree, the aphids, the giant aphids in the genus Cinara. They're often darker than this. This is a little lighter brown, but oftentimes they're almost black. Fairly large for aphids, much larger than a typical aphid, let's just say. And so if you see little black insects crawling in your home, especially around where the Christmas tree is, it's almost certainly the case that that's what they are. They can just be simply vacuumed up. They only feed on those furs, and unless they get to another conifer host that they can feed on, they're not going to be a pest, but they are a nuisance in the home. And there's gonna be household invaders. So it's getting cool now. Things are gonna start to come indoors. You'll get stink bugs and ladybugs and some other kinds of critters that like to come indoors to hibernate. Cockroaches and spiders that kind of are active all year round and reproducing all year round may have times where they're going to be coming indoors to get away from the outside cold. So you may see more activity in homes from these insects and other arthropods. And finally, some opportunistic activity. So in the winter in North Carolina, we do have fairly mild winters. It could be warm certain days. And so basically, if they're insects that are active or at least overwintering as adults and can be activated by that warm days, they may come around still. So you may have days in the winter where mosquitoes are a little bit more active. You'll have fruit flies or blowflies or things like that that are out and about in the winter. You might think are should be completely done with activity by now. But they can be opportunistically coming out when on warm days. And with that, I will end my session and we can watch Mike's video.
Sounds
And
great.
please let me know if you have any questions, more questions about everything, and I'll try and answer some of the questions in the chat.
All right. Thank you so much, Matt. And as you said, Mike Munster is at class this morning, and so he has recorded his disease. Be on the lookout, and we'll get that playing now.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is Mike Munster presenting to you on a recorded session because I have class this morning. And I wanted to say not only good morning, but especially to those of you in the western part of the state who were affected by Helene, that I hope your recovery is going well. And maybe this program is just a little bit of a respite, a little bit of a breather to think about something else. One of the things that you will likely get inquiries about, phone calls, is the problem on our arborvitaes, perhaps on our chamaecyparis, maybe some other trees, which is the internal browning or natural senescence. And I show the photo on the right to illustrate that these two trees are doing the same thing. In the fall of the year, the arborvitae is dropping its oldest needles, and the maple is going to drop all of its leaves. So this is not a cause of concern unless you start seeing these evergreens dropping the newer needles, the ones that formed this year or last year, in which case you may want to investigate to make sure you don't have some other kind of problem such as root disease. Continuing with our tree and shrub BOLOs for the fall and early winter. On boxwood, starting from the upper right, working clockwise, on boxwood we may encounter boxwood blight. In fact, we just got a sample the other day here in the clinic that looked pretty suspicious for that. You even have to be looking out for it in any boxwood holiday greenery that you may buy, wreaths and garlands and so forth. So check those before purchasing them. Boxwood stem canker would appear different, very different from boxwood blight, since the leaves don't fall off, they turn yellow on individual branches. Now, this is not the only thing that can do that, but that would be one of your hypotheses, one of the things to look for when you start seeing that sort of symptom. And boxwoods, of course, have a number of below ground problems such as root rot and several different nematode species. On Indian hawthorns, well, throughout the year, but it'll be a little bit more noticeable perhaps, since these are evergreen and many things in the landscape are not, that you have Entomosporium leaf spot, the bright red spots with grayish blistery centers. The leaves may turn completely red. There may be some yellowing. They may fall off. And susceptibility is variable depending on the cultivar of Indian hawthorn that you have. But again, a very common disease in our landscapes. Rose with armillaria root rot is a possibility, and also rose rosette. Now, in a plant that's been infected for many years, you're going to be seeing the witch's broom type symptoms. But you may also see in early infections, as illustrated in the lower left here, the elongation of the new growth, the red juvenile coloration that persists instead of fading to green. Well, that would be during the growing season. You might notice that. And a giveaway is that you have canes that are thicker, wider than the cane from which they grew, the parent. So if you see that, there is nothing but rose rosette that can do that, as well as the hyperthorniness, which isn't always present, but if you see that, then that is another 100% indication that rose rosette is the problem. Be sure if you do have those brooms, those clusters of growth at the plant, especially those tend to be where the mites, the vectors, are in high population. So get that plant out of the landscape. Even with the early symptoms, that is the management strategy. As we start to have the leaves falling off our trees, we'll notice more of the branch and bark type problems, such as the black knot on plum and black cherry. I've also added apricot here, and a pretty characteristic gall there forming on these hosts, and not much that you would mistake that for. Also, on some of our especially smooth bark trees and shrubs, we may be seeing septibasidium or felt fungus. This is not going to do any damage to the plant itself, but rather is developing on colonies of scale insects that are on that particular plant. You may also be on the lookout for wildlife damage from sapsuckers, voles, and so forth. Of course, sapsuckers on the trunk and voles down at the base or just underground. Continuing with our tree and shrub bolos for late fall and early winter. Many hosts, I already mentioned rose as one to be looking for armillaria, and box would be one to look out for Phytophthora, but there are many hosts for these. With armillaria, you may be able to diagnose yourself by looking under the bark at the base of the main stem or in the larger roots to see if you have the mycelial mat there of the fungus. Of course, this is a very destructive sample, and you wouldn't want to recommend it unless the homeowner has already decided that this tree or shrub is coming out. With spruce, be on the lookout for rhizosphere needle cast, the browning and dropping of needles. And you can see in the photograph here that this is happening on the previous year's needles, and you would not expect that to be the case. So a possibility here, rhizosphere needle cast, and this tends to work its way from the lower and inner portions of the tree outward and upward. And Cercospora leaf spot on ligustrum privet, which tends to have the rather large, well, here you can see small to medium, but they can be fairly large blotches, chlorotic or yellow, and somewhat diffuse margins. In the vegetable garden, we want to be on the lookout for black rot of crucifers, and that's the photograph in the middle there, which actually is kale, but you notice the typical V-shaped brown to yellow lesions around the margin there. It doesn't always have to show up that way, but that's one of our most important diseases of crucifers. It is bacterial, and it's one that you want to be careful with your transplants that you aren't buying in and bringing into your garden. Among the fungi, Sclerotinia stem rot, would be a concern. You can see the photograph at the bottom there on collards, where you get a decay of the stem, and eventually you can see the mycelium there, the fungal growth developing, and you may see later on the sclerotia, the black survival structures that develop. White spot on turnip and Cercospora leaf spot of Swiss chard, beet, and spinach would be some other fungal diseases to be on the lookout for in the vegetable garden. And of course, my favorite, be on the lookout for those seed catalogs coming in the winter. In the flower bed, not so much going on, but we do want to be on the lookout for a few different problems. Now in the fall, we'll be seeing the last hurrah of the rusts and the powdery mildews on a number of bedding plants and perennials. And we could be seeing some cold injury, of course, the timing being very important there as to when and how hard the first freezes of the fall arrive and the last freezes of the spring. Since pansies are stalwarts for color in the garden during the winter months, we do want to be careful. Another one to be on the lookout for as you buy your transplants, check to see that you do not have black root rot. Often that's going to be indicated by some yellowing and some stunting of the plants. So if you see that, definitely check those roots out, and buyer beware. Phytophthora root and crown rot can occur after transplant, and Pythium root rot is another one that you can have. Well, botrytis blight is one where we would see it on the flowers and then spreading to the leaves, tending toward the later part of the pansy growing season. And also on the buyer beware note, within the last couple of weeks, have had 2 occasions where I did not plant a plant in our garden because it turned out to have root knot nematodes. One was a tuberose that my sister-in-law had bought at a nursery, and another was this hardy ginger that I had purchased. And it's unfortunate because you would look at it and you would see that there are dead roots, but there are some live roots. And it took careful examination under the microscope, and you can see the picture here. I didn't find any live adult females, but there's that second stage juvenile there, and also the egg in the upper portion of that photograph. So definitely be on the lookout. I wouldn't say it's just restricted to these underground tuberous rhizomatous type plants, but that is where I encountered it just in this month of October. Finally, the area that I always put in the disclaimer that I am not a turf pathologist, but I understand that during these months, fairy ring would be a possibility on any kind of turf grass, as well as large patch on the warm season grasses that will be under stress as the temperatures drop, and yellow patch as a possibility on fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, and ryegrass. And if you need something to do on a cold winter night, there's always the BOLO list on the PDIC website to check out. So I want to say thank you to Caroline and Charlotte for another great year of PP&P, and wish everyone well this winter.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. Let's get out of this, and we are going to move on to our EMG program announcements for this month. Okay, first is that the online therapeutic horticulture classes that are co-hosted by North Carolina Botanical Garden and NC State Extension Gardener are now scheduled for 2025. So if you are interested in starting the series, it's a series of 4 classes, or if you are somewhere along the way and it's time to plan ahead, go ahead and check out that link and you can get registered. Also, information that was discussed at the EMG College was the difference between horticultural therapy and therapeutic horticulture. So I included this little graphic from the online courses website. You might want to take a look at that just out of curiosity and how those different terms are used in the industry. And speaking of classes to consider, winter months are always good for taking asynchronous classes that are self-paced. And so Extension Gardener is offering a couple of different series right now, the plant identification and use, which has many different types of plants that are focused on in different series. And then the gardens, lawns, and landscapes series is also going to start up again in January. So in light of the counties that have been impacted by Hurricane Helene in Western North Carolina, Seed Savers Exchange has been coordinating a seed donation program to help farmers and gardeners in that part of our state. So if you are interested in learning more about that and their own disaster relief efforts, please check out that link. At the end of every Plants, Pests, and Pathogens season, we want to get your feedback on what you thought of the presentations this past year. That helps us plan for next year. So you will now be getting a link to our season evaluation, which is a Google form that we'd ask you to fill out. It'll be coming to you in email if you registered for this seminar on the EMG intranet. It'll also be posted on the EMG intranet. We hope that you'll take a minute to fill that out. As we look ahead to next year, Plants, Pests, and Pathogens is always on the 4th Tuesday of each month, and we do that from February to October. So the new season will begin on February 25th. We will see you again. And as the winter continues, we develop the schedule. So closer to the new year, we'll post the 2025 schedule so you can see the speakers that we have lined up. Now, I do want to always remind you that all of these webinars are recorded and that we have recordings for many, many years. And so the easiest way to find a Plant, Pests, and Pathogens episode that you might have missed is to log on to the EMG intranet and remember to go to the North Carolina tab. You usually land on your county tab. In this case, the example is Alamance County. But you want to go right up to that North Carolina tab and scroll down to this section called Program Support. And down there, we've got our own menu item, Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. So once you click on that, it brings you to this page. And you've got the 2024 season recordings as well as 23 and 22 right there. And then you've got even older recordings that are already on our YouTube playlist. So go ahead and take advantage of those. We want to, I do want to say a special thank you to those of you that have been helping with editing the subtitle for these episodes. Every time that those subtitles are edited and corrected, we can post another one of our webinars for the public on YouTube and add it to that playlist. So there's been a lot of good work in the past 6 months by some of you working on those subtitles. So thank you. And that will conclude our 2024 Plants, Pests, and Pathogens season. We thank you for a great season and for a significant year for us at the Master Gardener program because we accomplished EMG College. And we thank Matt and Mike for both contributing to the content for EMG College last month. And with that, we will say, take care. We'll see you again in February.
And thanks to you guys for all your help with the supporting this program and putting it together and organizing. And it's so much work, and we appreciate it too. So we love being on this program. It's fun, and yeah, looking forward to next year.
You're very welcome. Thank you.